Ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to take your seats, please? Exactly. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming back so promptly. My name is Bill Emmett. I'm a trustee of the IISS, and I'm part of that dangerous species called a journalist. But that means that I learn most when I'm listening rather than speaking, so that I will listen a lot, and then I will try also to connect together the four excellent panelists we have here in a conversation after they have done the important work of speaking. Now, this session has already been, in a way, billed by the previous two sessions as the real life session. Welcome to the real world is what the other sessions have said. Government to government, well, that's all very well, but the Pacific Alliance and the relationship with Asia will be built from the bottom up. It will be built by people-to-people connections, but especially by people-to-people connections working in organizations called businesses. If the Pacific Alliance potential is to be realized, then it will be because the agents of that realization, businesses, build the integration, invent the economic opportunities that are there. So that is what we're here to discuss and to examine for you and with you this afternoon. Really, any discussion about business perspectives in a context such as this is very much about opportunities, but also about obstacles, and of course risks being a very IISS word. So that's what we're going to try to explore. It's risks and opportunities and obstacles in what one should emphasize is an ever-changing world, which businesses are especially conscious of. If we'd had this discussion 2-3 years ago, we'd probably be talking a lot more about commodity booms. Now, with oil having halved in price in the last 12 months, with commodity prices having softened considerably, we're into a different area. And as Minju said in the previous session, we're looking for a new normal. The new normal in this real life session is what we will bring you. We're going to start with Kojima-san, from the chairman of the board of Mitsubishi Corporation. Mitsubishi Corporation, what's important to know about it, is that it's thought of as a trading company because of its heritage as a so-called Sogo Shosha. But really now it's an investment company. And it's this region's investments that we want to hear about. Kojima-san.
Well, thank you very much for your kind introductions, and Bill Emmett-san. And I am, as introduced, Yorihiko Kojima of Mitsubishi Corporation. I am very much honored to participate in this very important conference. There are 3 points today that I would like to talk about. The first point is the importance of free trade and the advent of an era of mega FTAs. The second point is expectations for the nations of the Pacific Alliance. The third point is relations between the Pacific Alliance and Japan. Okay, I'll talk about the first point, the importance of free trade and mega FTAs. The world economy is growing through the advance of globalization. This can be seen in the expansion of the trade, the building of supply chains, increased investment, improvement of infrastructure, simplification of customs and tax procedure, and greater labor mobility. On the other hand, with the rise of emerging nations, the international trade structure is beginning to face difficulties. The decline in the governing and administrative function of the World Trade Organization, WTO, is one such example. The WTO's conflict resolution function is still very important, but the Doha Development Round negotiations have effectively been halted, and instead many bilateral and regional agreements have been initiated. Well, recent trend is the increasing presence of so-called mega FTAs, such as the Trans-Profit Partnership, TPP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, regional and Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP. Once all these mega FTA are in place, there will be a greater degree of free trade in the world, which will greatly enhance economic growth. The Abe government in Japan, which took office in December 2012, has also actively pursued EPAs and FTAs as part of its growth strategy. In July 2013, Japan joined the TPP negotiations. In addition to the TPP, Japan began negotiating in earnest on the Japan-China-South Korea FTA, the Japan-EU EPA, and the RCEP in the same year, including the TPP. The four mega FTAs combined will cover about 80% of world GDP. As an important player in negotiations on inter-regional mega FTAs, the TPP, the Japan-EU EPA, and the RCEP, Japan hopes to actively contribute to the development of the world's largest economic zone. Okay, now the second point, expectation for the Pacific Alliance. The Pacific Alliance is an emerging economic zone with a market of 200 million people and a rapidly growing middle class. The combined GDP of the four Pacific Alliance nations is about $2 trillion, roughly the size of the Italian economy, and representing about 38% of the economic activity for Latin America. Because of its proximity to the North American and Asian markets, foreign corporations see it as an opportunity to build a production and supply chain basis aimed at expanding business in Asia and North America. Latin America countries can also benefit from the Asian markets, which serve as an engine of economic growth. I do expect more trade and investment from both sides of the Pacific. Before coming to Cartagena, I informed Prime Minister Abe that I would be attending this conference. Prime Minister Abe attended the last year's IISS Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore and gave a keynote address about the importance of peace and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. I believe that this Cartagena Dialogue, encouraging stronger cooperation between Asia and Latin America, aligns with the Prime Minister Abe's aim for the Asia-Pacific region. And before I came over here, I had a meeting with Prime Minister Abe, and he encouraged me to discuss very positively with the members here and to that Cartagena Dialogue, and to encourage the people in Asian Pacific and Latin America people work closely together. That was his message I received. Well, As you may know, last December, Prime Minister Abe resolved the diet and succeeded to reform the cabinet, and now he will be staying on his position and the Prime Minister for another 4 years. Therefore, he is very much confident for the Japanese economy. Now, last week, I also had a chance to meet with the Japanese ambassadors to Latin America in Keidanren meeting, who were visiting Tokyo, and I'm chairman of Japan Latin American committee in Keidanren. That's the reason why I chaired that meeting. On that occasion, we affirmed the importance of the Asia and Latin America partnership. Japanese companies are also paying attention to the Pacific Alliance. In 2010, 609 Japanese companies had begun operations in the 4 nations of the Pacific Alliance. In 2013, that number had increased up to 874, more than 30% up. And in 2013, Japan External Trade Organization, or JETRO, surveyed about 70% of Japanese companies in Central and South America said that they plan to expand business there, Latin America, and over the next 2 years. They are very much confident to increase the business level. Well, incidentally, Latin America is a key region for the Mitsubishi Corporation, and in addition to the resource business, and we have recently been expanding business, targeting consumer markets or even retail business. At the same time, there are obstacles to Japanese companies entering Central and South America. In the same JETRO survey, more than 70% of Japanese companies doing business in Central and South America said that they had concern about rising wages, public safety, and underdeveloped logistics infrastructure. I also hope that these challenges will be overcome through the development of EPAs and FTAs and further public-private sector cooperation. Okay, now the third point, relations between the Pacific Alliance and Japan. As for trade, Japan already has bilateral EPAs with Chile, Peru, and Mexico, while no EPA with Colombia has been signed, and the Japanese Business Federation of Keidanren's Japan-Colombia Economic Committee that I chaired issues a joint statement on the importance of concluding an EPA in 2011. With a joint statement as a starting point, our two governments began EPA negotiations in 2012. Colombia has the second largest population in South America and abundant resources and is expected to post stable growth. I do expect the conclusion of an EPA to bring great benefits to both Japan and Colombia. As chairman of the Japan-Colombia Economic Committee, I myself, I intend to continue lobbying the Japanese government to quickly conclude the Japan-Colombia EPA. Maybe with this regard, and Ambassador Suzuki-san has already explained to you in the second session, and I do hope this will be concluded very shortly. Finally, I would like to briefly touch on the strategies Japanese companies have used to enter and succeed in Latin America. Particularly investments in related local enterprise, mergers and acquisitions, and the utilizations of local business partners have been the key. Once established, Japanese companies are successfully expanding their business by developing and utilizing local human resources and working with the partner companies. My company entered the Latin America market during the 1950s. Together with our excellent local partners, we have expanded the business in both the resource and non-resource sectors. Well, quite recently, we have developed the business together with the Colombian company and formed a joint venture in Malaysia. We are now developing some food materials to make the food materials and sell those materials and in Malaysia. This kind of business model will be developed very briefly, and this will be we are expanding more business, and together with the Latin America and say Asian Pacific countries. So as you can see, in order to build large-scale business that connects Asia and Latin America development of a free trade environment and the cooperation with the local governments and the good business partners very much essential. And in the meantime, as you may know, say Prime Minister Abe came to the Latin America last year, the July and August. Since I myself, the chairman of the Japan and the Latin America Economic Committee, I was requested to join his trip. And at that time, he also traveled the 5 Latin American countries with, say, so many people, including medium and small business companies. And one of those small and business middle companies has quite recently decided to open the company in Colombia. And this kind of things will be happening very shortly. And this is very good, and under such circumstances, I will continue to do my utmost effort to help Japanese companies build win-win partnership with the Pacific Alliance nations. I think this is a very, very important issue. Well, anyhow, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kojima-san, for that very salutary mixture of both positive thinking, ambition, but also an emphasis on the obstacles, rising wages, public safety, and logistics, very important to focus on. And again, the fact that Japan is conducting EPA negotiations country by country tells us also about the institutional limitations of the Pacific Alliance so far. That this is obviously a nascent creation in institutional terms. Now, Omar Lodi is going to be our next speaker, partner and regional head of East Asia for the Abraj Group, private equity group, located everywhere but nowhere in the emerging world, specializing in the emerging world. And I want you to come, well, you can speak from there or from, actually there is excellent, speak from there and tell us about how you see the opportunities, obstacles and risks.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you to John and the IISS for not just holding this dialogue, but to include the important topic of business potential between the Pacific Alliance and Asia, a topic which A, is not discussed much, certainly in Asia, and B, represents a huge and untapped sort of potential and opportunity. So, just to give you context, we operate as a private equity firm across emerging markets, or what we call the global growth markets. We feel they've emerged. We are in Pacific Alliance here in the 3 countries except Chile. We will go into Chile this year. We're in Sub-Saharan Africa, MENA, and Asia. Now, these markets account for some 50% of global GDP. More importantly, they account for 2/3, or they will account for 2/3 of global growth between now and 2025. And given their growing economic importance, trade and capital flows between the emerging world, southern hemisphere countries, have actually exceeded, they've been growing at about 9% compound annual growth rate for several years. And today they have exceeded south-north trade flows and capital flows, and they're narrowing the gap on north-north trade and capital flows itself. They're probably 20% under. And Asia and LATAM and the Pacific Alliance countries are an integral part of the growth market story, underpinned by young demographics, growing urbanization, growing middle-income classes, and ultimately all of this leading to growing consumerism, which is where all the excitement is generated and the opportunity. Now, we've heard this morning a lot of stats about growth between trade, between Pacific Alliance, LATAM, and Asia, and it's difficult, by the way, and this says something, to even decipher data which is purely Pacific Alliance oriented as opposed to broader LATAM data. And while trade has therefore grown from, let's say, 60 billion to almost 500 billion in 2012 between Asia and LATAM, on the LATAM side, Brazil is 30% of that, and on the APAC side, China is 50% of that. FDI flows tell an even more sorry story. FDI flows from Asia, we accounted for under 10% of FDI into either Latin America or the Pacific Alliance. And of course, LATAM FDI into Asia was a paltry figure of 0.3%. So the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, I would submit, is untapped. And not enough effort from business, I should say, has been made to focus on it. Now, yes, there are some challenges and complexities which we all have to face. Geographical distances. We were all joking, those of us who came from Singapore and Indonesia, Pak Marty also, it took us about 40 hours to get here. Now that says something. But that's not just geographic distances. My geography is horrible, but we were plotting Singapore and Bogota and their proximity to the equator. And as the crow flies, it will probably be a 12, 13-hour flight. And as Cesar said this morning, it was me who told him that our country here from Peru took about 7 hours to reach here. So even within the region. Obviously, these distances lead to costs and complexities in freight and logistics. There is a concentration of trade pattern among certain countries, China and Japan on the Asia side, Brazil, Mexico on the LATAM side. Some degree of tensions, perhaps, due to the commodity for manufacturing patterns, commodities going into Latin America, from Latin America into Asia, manufacturing product coming vice versa. Yes, a proliferation of FTAs, bilateral FTAs, which have been hugely beneficial, but potentially, I would argue, limited depth and scope of these FTAs, and shallow geographic coverage, with a need to address the potential of noodle bowl transaction costs resulting from this proliferation of bilateral treaties and rules of origin. But to focus on the opportunities, these challenges are not unsurmountable. And the opportunities are abundant to harmonize trade, enhance cross-border FDI, and leverage on the comparative advantages between the regions. Yes, we have APAC's needs for commodities and food, and the productivity and market share and ability of the Pacific Alliance countries to export that. The Pacific Alliance countries can benefit from APAC's experience in manufacturing, energy and infrastructure, many sectors that Mitsubishi and giants like them focus on, production supply chains, public-private partnerships, and all of this not just in the context of increased export from Asia, but indeed investment and FDI footprint into Latin America and into the Pacific Alliance from Asia. I am no trade expert, but yes, it makes a lot of common sense to move from a bilateral to a multilateral trade environment. TPP is certainly probably a step in the right direction. but I don't see how it will be hugely beneficial without the inclusion of important countries on both sides, Colombia on the Latin American side and several countries excluded on the Asian side. And hence, like both Cesar Purisima and Pa Marti alluded to this morning, a huge opportunity staring us in the face, and Fardino, between ASEAN and the Pacific Alliance. These are two regional blocs already formed. Pacific Alliance, we all heard this morning, 8th largest economic bloc, 200 million people, $2.1 trillion of GDP. We in ASEAN, in December 2015, will form our AEC. We're 10 nations, we're 600 million people, 2.4 trillion in GDP. And I would purport that just these two countries, to harmonize, open up ultimately, one day, labor flows, capital market flows, is a truly, truly exciting thought. And while all the capable ministers of trade and finance sitting in this room will ultimately get us there, not sure how long it might take, but even today, ladies and gentlemen, for business, the opportunities are ripe and rampant. And I say that because the Pacific Alliance countries and the ASEAN countries are at the core of this growth in consumerism. And that consumer dynamic lends itself for businesses to merge, to geographically expand, and leverage their models in the different emerging market geographies, and to do so with tremendous synergy. I can name you a whole host of sectors which we see opportunities in every day. It can range from education to healthcare to FMCG to food and beverage. We have companies over here, Peruvian restaurants that have expanded not just into Europe and America, but into Asia. We have education businesses in Asia, English language skills, tutoring skills, etc., which we are expanding into the Pacific Alliance countries. So a whole host of opportunity and low-hanging fruit for the business world to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar. So we have this contrast between the untapped sense of the opportunity and the feeling that it's ripe and rampant, as you put it. And what we need to focus on in our conversation is how to get from untapped to deliciously consumed. Katia Boazza will be our next explorer of this territory, from HSBC in New York, head of Latin America and capital financing. And she's going to give us a sense of the financial perspective from the view of investors.
Maybe I'll be somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
So, buenas tardes. Es un placer estar aquí con.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here in a city that is as beautiful as Cartagena. Today I'll speak in English because my Spanish is not that good, but I will be available to take questions in Spanish.
First of all, let me thank President Santos, all the ministers and the delegations here for supporting this event. I want to thank IISS and John Shipman for involving HSBC in this very exciting gathering, and mainly for getting me out of New York with this very cold weather. So thank you, John. My remarks will be brief. I know we've had a lot of discussions, and it's after lunch, so I'm not going to bore you. But I want to focus more on finance and the global markets, which is an important part of this equation within trade and alliances. I've personally spent 18 years working with emerging markets, first with Asia, and then the past 10 years or so with Latin America. So this topic of bringing the two regions together is very close to my heart. I can tell you without a doubt that from where I'm sitting, the markets are truly global. Companies are thinking globally in their capital raising and investment exercises, and investors are thinking globally. We see money moving very fast, and we see money moving very far. So without offending any of the policymakers, we in the private sector, we don't understand why alliances and trade agreements take so long. But having said that, we hope both the Pacific Alliance and the Trans-Pacific Alliance move quickly, and we see it for the benefit of several market participants. Now, research has shown that liberalizing trade and investment policy stimulates economic growth, which makes this discussion of trade agreements especially important today when countries are looking for catalysts for growth, and every single percentage and point really matters. In this environment where I'm sitting from the global markets, we see plenty and ample of liquidity, especially in Asia. I've been working a long time with both regions, and I think it's very hard to explain to people on the other side of the Pacific, usually we say the Atlantic, what Asia really represents and the amount of the depth and the wealth and the liquidity there. HSBC as a bank has been working for the past 10 years to really open new markets and really connect the regions. And Asia has been core to this and key component of the regions we've been opening up and connecting mainly with Latin America, whether you call it South-South connectivity or other terms. It's really about getting the two to see the benefits of working together. Asia has, as I said, ample liquidity, and we have seen it in several examples in capital markets over the past 10 years for Latin American issuers. We have opened, for example, the perpetual market in 2004 with the first issuance by Pemex in the perp market for $1.75 billion. When we started, actually, a small anecdote, when we embarked on that in that roadshow, there was very little clarity in how much we were going to be able to raise. And in 2 days, the book mainly focused on Asia was $5 billion, and that's 2004. Several deals and several other issuers have followed into that market. We did the first Hong Kong dollar for CABE, and CAF followed as well in 2006. In 2012, we did the first offshore RMB for America Mobile that allowed it to benefit from settlement in RMB with its suppliers at discounts. So it was core to its own business. And last year we opened the Formosa market for out of Taiwan for CABE as well. So these are real examples, and these are real investors coming together, from Asia with Latin America, and we want to see more of that. Also, we've been very active in promoting the local markets in Latin America, and specifically with the Pacific Alliance bloc. I think those have been the strongest market to date. We have seen those markets grow rapidly, and international investors, including Asia, have become a key part of these markets. For example, foreign ownership of local Mexican government went from something around 10% in 2009 to today close to 40%. And just in terms of figures, this represents about approximately $144 billion equivalent, so quite significant. One anecdote: we were on a roadshow with the Mexican government a little bit over 5 years ago, and we went into an investor in Asia. We were promoting Mexico in Asia. We went into an investor to sell the merits and the creditworthiness of Mexico, and it was an exercise that the UMS was undertaking for Mexico and for its companies there. And after presenting a lot of the highlights and selling Mexico's big picture, we were, very surprised that the investor that was sitting across from us in Asia had specific questions on the M Bono curve, and they had been, investing all along in the local market. So that was a bit of a wake-up call, just to see, how sophisticated Asia was, even though it was not very transparent and very clear at the time. So hence, the market is fluid, and investment between the Pacific Alliance and the Asian countries is very real and is growing in importance from where I sit and from capital markets. I want to hone in on the top areas local and international investors generally focus on when it comes to trade alliances, given my experience with the Latin American, both sovereign and corporates borrowers. Investors will look at the degree of market liberalization that will result from such trade agreements, the level of protection the agreements will grant investors, both local and foreign, specific details around the recourse if agreements are not respected and if there are violations, and the level of market transparency that can help create a level of playing field, basically ensuring that all market participants are treated fairly. It goes without saying that no one likes uncertainty, and today, whether it is in capital markets or business or politics, transparency goes a long way. So I think with that, I've highlighted several points that I'd like to turn it over to the panel and to the audience, and have a more dynamic discussions around these points. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Katja, for particularly highlighting the degree of sophistication and importance of that Asian capital as investors here in this region, but also about the very important things that such investors look for in these trade liberalization deals or anyway, in economic liberalization deals. Now we're going to move straight on to David Bohanini Garcia, who is CEO of Grupo Sura here in Colombia, in Medellin, who sees things from the inside, and what to you are the obstacles, what to you are the opportunities in this Pacific Alliance and in this relationship with all this international capital.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. The Pacific Alliance was born from the understanding that our countries, united, can become much more relevant on the world level than each of them individually. I want to say this because I believe that all of those of us that are participating in an alliance this important must be aware of that anytime we carry out an activity related to this alliance. Without a doubt, as we have seen today in the different presentations about the importance of this alliance between four countries, which already enjoys more than 200 million in population. That represents approximately 36% of the Latin American GDP. In sum, the Pacific Alliance is certainly very important. And many of us see it in terms of international trade, but it must also be examined from the perspective of the financial system. The financial system can be a great support and a great engine of that trade between the different countries that make up an alliance such as this one. We have also heard about the integration of the stock markets of the different countries that make up the Pacific Alliance, what we call the MILA. This alliance was first between Chile, Peru, and Colombia, And later on, Mexico entered into this integration of the stock markets. As someone was mentioning this morning, it's a market of around $900 trillion, with more than 800 important issuers signed up to these markets. But what we can see in Mila is that it has not developed at the rate that we would have liked to see. And in fact, one of the proposals that I would like to make today to this auditorium is how pension funds, private pension funds that exist in the 4 countries of the Pacific Alliance, could be the catalyzing motor of that integration between markets. I would like for the capital markets of the 4 countries or the Pacific Alliance to develop more quickly. Nowadays, pension funds in these 4 countries manage funds that amount to more than $400 trillion. They have 75 million people signed up to these funds who are in fact the owners of those resources. So my proposal is with regards to the following. Investments that these funds make in any one of the 4 countries should be considered within the rules of those funds as local investments. Why do I say this? Because over the years, an industry that has already been around for over 30 years in our continent, it has been concentrating. For instance, we can observe that in each country there are 4 or 5 or perhaps 6 pension funds when there used to be many more actors on the stage. The country that has the most pension funds is Mexico, where we have also seen a process of consolidation. But what takes place when the number of pension funds is reduced? Well, first of all, if the investment caps of the pension funds are concentrated in each of the countries individually. With our proposal, what we seek is that a pension fund from any country of the Pacific Alliance may, within their local investment cap, invest in any one of the 4 countries. This would bring great benefits, not just for the pension funds, but for those issuing. Allow me to explain myself. For pension funds, it's a diversification of risk, not only from the geographical point of view, but also from the sectoral point of view, because pension funds will be exposed to more companies, and they will not center their investments on a few important national issuers. We would have not just 5 or 6 institutional investors in each country, but we would have more than 30 important institutional investors participating in each of the markets. For countries, oftentimes the caps for local investment that pension funds are given are higher because they want to encourage the savings of people of a country to stay within that country. But by affiliating other countries, it'll come around to the same effect, and it won't significantly change things. In addition, it will establish a regulatory stability because it will no longer be a matter of local investment, a domestic investment, but it will become a regulation that covers 4 nations that have to maintain stability. It would also give more liquidity to the issuers. Issuers would be exposed to more investors, institutional investors, which would lend these markets more depth And something else that's very important. Financing any investment project will have the possibility, they will have the option of issuing stocks or credits. So this has certain great advantages, but what is needed in order for this to occur? If we can achieve this, then the integration of markets will advance at a very different pace. We need to homogenize the regulation between the 4 countries. Here we touch on topics such as investment limits, issues of tax structuring, the degree of investment in each country. There are certain countries that do not allow their investment funds to invest in countries with a lower credit rating. But the truth is that all 4 countries have a good credit rating, and what we call credit rating indicates that there is a credit risk which is enough for the regulations existing in each country. So what happens when we sit down in an auditorium such as this and discuss alliances such as the Pacific Alliance, those who are involved in an initiative as important as this one, we can see that we are full of good intentions, such as the first sentence I said today. But when we start coming down, we start seeing details. That means that this won't actually work in practice as we would have liked. And the difficulties are not just regulatory. It is the attitude of the business people themselves with regards to these opportunities. We often don't see it so clearly, as clear as we should. So this brief discourse is an invitation. First of all, our leaders, our presidents, ministers, please support this sort of initiative with regards to the middle management so that these details can promote an alliance as important as this one, allowing for the institutional investors in other areas such as business and tax, so that we can promote an initiative as important as this one. And certainly I would also invite all business people to see the advantages of the Pacific Alliance. Opportunity for your companies to develop. But certainly, I would like to say that we are very happy for there to be an event like this, where not only do we have the countries of the Pacific Alliance, but we also have the Asian countries here showing all the interest that we've seen them show today, seeking to strengthen relationships and form stronger partnerships, not only business partnerships, but financial ones.
Very positive proposal, especially that would would have a lot of impact on the financial integration of the region, but also illustrates very well the this dilemma between, if you like, bureaucracy and simply government-to-government operation, or rather, in building an alliance like this, the importance of rules and then the enforcement of rules. Unfortunately, we as Europeans, unfortunately I'm a European representative here, know very well that the more integrated you become, the more you harmonize rules. But let me say first, repeat the fact that I'm a dangerous person, i.e. I'm a journalist, because it means I have a lot of questions. Don't have answers, I have questions. And I'm going to change the format a little bit by asking some questions of our panelists here, in between which I hope that we can intersperse some contributions and questions from the floor. We have 35 minutes, so plenty of time for lots of questions. I particularly want to start with this issue of logistics, the amount of time that it took people from Asia to get here, but also the connections within the region and the issues of logistics from the point of view of companies. I mean, really, the costs. What can be done? What do you want to be done, Omar, to change this? And can investors, can a private equity group like yours make a difference to this if you're given the permissions?
It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. I mean, as we sit in Asia, leveraging and just, taking it from our perspectives, we are always trying to leverage our footprint in terms of how we can expand businesses we invest in geographically. And to be honest, in a world which is increasingly global and competitive, it's one of our key differentiators as well, to be able to go into a noodle manufacturer, let's say, sitting in Indonesia, and who've been exporting to Africa for several years, and now, after successfully building that trading operation up, want to put manufacturing facilities on the ground. Our ability to help them navigate Africa, find local partners, we could be their local partner, etc., thereby differentiating ourselves and creating opportunity. Now, the reality is that when we think about, whether it's education, businesses, restaurants, hospitals, logistics, everybody, and we're usually working with promoters, right, in Asia. Africa's top of their agenda. MENA is top of their agenda. They see it, they've been there, they feel it, they touch it. But Latin America is the unknown, right? It's completely the unknown. And part of the reason why it's unknown is because there's just so little connectivity between and I don't mean logistical connectivity, but even business activity, G2G activity, right? In the run-up to this conference, I went and met the ambassadors in Singapore of each of the Pacific Alliance countries. They're great people, but they have limited means, limited resources, limited visibility. And so when we talk to promoters in Asia say, oh no, Latin America, or even investors in Asia who invest in private equity firms, they'll happily invest in Asia. They'll happily invest Japanese investors in Africa. But again, Latin America is the unknown. So increasing awareness. And governments have a role to play over here. Governments on either side bringing delegations of business leaders to each other's countries, trying to get the word out, tapping the opportunities. Singapore does this, and Singapore, of course, is always at the forefront of things. We do a Sino Latin America conference once every 2 years. It's happening again in October. That's one. Two, the logistics, as part of that, we have to encourage airlines to start flying. If there were a flight direct from Singapore to Bogota, it would literally, I conjecture, be about 12, 13 hours, which is a flight time that we in Singapore do at a heartbeat. Every week to London, to Frankfurt, to wherever else, right? The fact that it takes 40 hours to get here is in itself a huge deterrence for business, because how are you going to invest and have an operation on the ground when it takes you 40 hours to get there? So I guess simple things like that, but again, the airlines won't fly until it doesn't become profitable. It won't become profitable until business activity and tourism, by the way, is another huge opportunity.
But Katja, would your investors invest in some of this logistics connections and infrastructure in order to make it happen in the way Omar wants it?
Investment will follow a good idea.
Yeah.
So, and I think definitely connectivity is definitely a good idea. We have seen it firsthand. The distances are huge. We're not going to close that. But we need to encourage governments and companies to take that trip, to market themselves in Asia. Asia is like a sleeping giant when it comes to Latin America, because so few have been willing to make that trip, and I'm talking this that way, from Latin America to Asia. We've worked very well with a number of Mexican companies, and we've worked very well with a number of Chilean companies and government, because they get it. Especially in Chile, where they're always looking towards Asia. The copper export is mainly to China, so they know that there are answers west. So they've been willing to take that extra step to go and let themselves be marketed with all these different investors, and they have seen the benefits. So until you do that work, you are not going to see the benefits. Asia is huge. It has a lot of investments within Asia. It can be self-contained, and it has other, it looks to Europe and the US and elsewhere. But once that first step is taken, we are seeing the benefits. We are seeing, the reciprocity. And also we are starting to see, we are starting to take Asian investors actually into Latin America, because they're saying, they're not going to wait until the companies go there. They want to come and be on the ground. And that's something that is happening both ways. At least in my side of the world, it's becoming the norm. You cannot leave Asia out.
Kojima-san, when you say to your colleagues in the Keidan Ren business organization, come with me on a trip to Colombia, Peru, Mexico, and Chile, do they enthusiastically get on the plane?
Very good questions. But we are looking at the Latin America. Western part is the Chile, Peru, Colombia, Mexico. And the economical situation is very good.
Yes.
And also, I myself visited those countries, and particularly, I was appointed the chairman of the Japan-Colombia Economic Committee, and also I'm appointed as the Japan-Latin American Economic Committee. And since then, I was requested to join the Prime Minister Abe's trip to there, and everyone was very much interested in those areas. Besides, economic situation is not so bad. Therefore, under such circumstances, and Keidan people are very much interested in the Latin American, and that's the reason why we invited the ambassador from those Latin Americans people, and we discussed ambassadors. And their message was very much encouraging for us to create more business. And particularly, as I told you, those Latin American people try to develop more business in the Asian countries. Therefore, now is very good timing for us to collaborate together. This will be a very good development of the economy in the world.
Yes.
I think so.
So the advertising now, moving to public safety, your other concern, the advertising now for Colombia in tourism is the biggest risk is that you won't want to leave, right? So how is that perceived in Japan? The public safety issue that you raised, it wasn't talking just about Colombia, this was a survey about Latin America, but what is the crucial thing that would change that answer?
Therefore, it may take some more time, but this time I'm now here in Cartagena.
Yes.
This is a very good place,
Yes.
Therefore, say, place by place, it's a bit different. And therefore, say, most of the Japanese people doesn't know the details of the Latin American situations. But I'm very much confident to introduce Latin America to the Japanese people, or even under such circumstances, China and the Korean people try to develop more business here in Latin America. Therefore, Asian people and Latin people now communicating very closely. That's I think very good issues, and to develop more business or economies in the world. In that sense, that's very good.
So David, now two questions for you really, but the first one, because this is the question I can ask you as an insider. There's a lot of talk here today, particularly from outsiders, about what Pacific Alliance means: democracy, rule of law, rules-based environment. Now, how do you see the middle of those, rule of law? How good is it really within the four countries, rule of law? Because this is a perceived problem by outside investors often, or a question, anyway. Do you see that?
Sí, yo creo que
Well, I believe the 4 countries that make up the Pacific Alliance are perhaps the most solid democracies on the continent. They have the rule of law has worked quite well, and I believe this is what has allowed there to be an initiative such as this between these 4 countries. Because we have had, I believe, some democratic principles, a form of operation free markets, which has allowed us to form an alliance such as the Pacific Alliance. Otherwise, it would be impossible. Clearly, as in the rest of the world, there may arise situations where they ask questions in regards to institutionality, but I believe there are 4 countries that have been strengthening their institutionality on a permanent basis. So I believe it is positive.
Mexico? Is this really the rule of law has improved as much as you say in Mexico?
Yo diría que sí. O sea,
I'd say that it has. As in all countries, there are difficulties that we face. So, due to specific situations, we can't try to say that it be questioned, the institutionality of a country. We must correct these situations, and we have faced these in all countries. We cannot, due to some specific cases, not allow a country to qualify that has made very significant reforms to invite investors to participate in their economy. So I believe we need to place all different facets in the balance. And of course, I am not the person to qualify or unqualify the institutionality of any of these countries.
Back to your pension fund proposal. And then I'll ask Katya about that. What would it take to make this proposal happen? Why hasn't it happened already? Perhaps is the other way of putting it. What is the obstacle? What needs to be done?
como lo mencioné hace un rato, lo importante es...
As was mentioned a while ago, the important thing is that we can make regulation equal because it varies in tax terms and the limits of investments and currency. And I believe that is where the problem arises. Fortunately, regulators of the 4 countries have been engaged in meetings and joint sessions where they are discussing these issues. But it's important for there to be the will of standardizing this regulation that allow these transactions, that it can be done in the equity markets, that can be much more fluid. I believe that's what is needed. On the other hand, the pension fund managers themselves sometimes believe that investment in the Pacific Alliance countries would be seen as foreign investments. So then they say, what do these 3 countries represent when compared with the total global investment we make? And it would be a very small percentage. But that is not the proposal. The proposal is that the investment in these 4 countries enter into the local investment caps, which is where the pension funds are focused.
In countries, the sort of political sensitivity about investment vehicles like insurance companies and private pension funds where the beneficiaries are ordinary people, and a reluctance to make that kind of, to have that will. But how do you, Katya, as representing a big global investment bank, looking at investment point of view, do you agree with David's proposal? Do you think that this is something that could happen? And
yeah, I definitely think there is a lot more that can be done. There's still a lot of restrictions, but we are starting to see a lot of the benefits. We're starting to see results. This is a region that has become a lot more, with the Pacific Alliance bloc, has become a lot more open, a lot more flexible, And we are seeing it in terms of the investors from the countries not only investing intra-regionally but also into dollar deals. So where in the past it used to be that you would come to the market with a dollar transaction, an equity or a debt transaction, and it will be mainly sold in the U.S. and then Europe became an important force, and Asia has started to come in. In the past couple of years, we started to see the region take up about 15% of any issuance because of the restrictions being lifted, I would say slowly, but in a very meaningful way. So there is a lot more there. There's the potential is much greater, but the importance, even think 15%, but the importance now of companies, like let's say a Colombian company going on a roadshow to Peru, going on a roadshow to Chile, a Mexican company going to Colombia. That's something that 2 years ago was not on the agenda. And now we are seeing that. So I'm not so worried that today is it 10%, is it 5%, can be 20. I'm seeing this step has been taken, and with further reforms within the bloc and even within Latin America. I mean, we don't have to stay within the bloc. This is definitely going to contribute to benefit the independence of the region, and especially within the Pacific Alliance.
Omar, you talked interestingly about the ASEAN economic community coming in and the creation of a single market, basically, a single market program for ASEAN. Bring that across to the Pacific Alliance and this question of what kind of balance between institutions and common and just agreement on rules, enforcement mechanisms. How could the lessons from ASEAN be learned in the Pacific Alliance and shared about how to carry forward integration, the sort that would encourage your companies and your investors?
I think the learning would be the other way. The Pacific Alliance countries have a head start on ASEAN. They formed their union in 2012. They achieved the remarkable feat of integrating their stock markets, which was really an incredible achievement. I'm not quite sure where they are in terms of free flow of labor and capital, but certainly they have moved with a lot more speed than ASEAN has, and that probably has something to do with how they empowered a Pacific Alliance body to actually get on with it. We in ASEAN, and I say this from a business standpoint with all due respect to government, but we in ASEAN we're heading towards December 2015 for the opening up of the economic community, which on paper is meant to open up trade flows, capital flows, foreign investment flows. Stock market integration is not on the agenda as yet. It's a pipe dream. But the reality is that we are lagging even on delivering the December 15 deliverables. Today, you cannot own more than 49% of a hamburger shop in Indonesia. A Malaysian pharmaceutical manufacturer can export to Africa, to MENA. It cannot export to Indonesia, or it cannot export to Thailand, where it'll take 7 years to register its product. So ASEAN is, I have to say, sadly, a long way away from delivering on its goals. They will be definitely lagged, and a reason for that has been because they have not adequately empowered their secretariat, and there are too many national agendas which have constrained progress. And it just seems, I don't know much about how the Pacific Alliance countries did it, but it seems that they have been able to solve that problem. There has been a lot more integration, I guess, of views, opinions, and the mobility and speed to get on with it.
You need to empower your secretariat to do the tasks that are necessary. Now,
if you leave it up to the national governments, then egos and other things prevail as they have in ASEAN.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to take a question from the floor. Chacon Carillo.
Thank you, Mr. Helmut. I would like to refer to the question that you made to Mr. Bohanini, which answered very well. I think that the rule of law finally is something that the businessmen, they have to decide if it's okay or not for them to invest in a country. I'm the head of an investment and promotion agency in Mexico, and we have been very successful receiving investment in the past years. Last year in ProMexico, we received $14.1 billion US, and we handled 175 projects from investors from all over the world. We do have problems in Mexico, yes. They are localized, and our government is fighting with the law in their hands to resolve them. So I think talking about the rule of law in general is distracting. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Blanco, yes.
I just wanted to comment that we've talked a lot about Latin America, the Pacific Alliance, and Asia as if though they were homogeneous markets, which they're not. They're all quite very different. And beyond the very big numbers that we've heard, which are quite dazzling, and also stating that I don't believe that there's any dispute about the potential of the Trans-Pacific opportunity, I would argue that the reality is that business, and particularly SMEs, don't have a level of awareness of what each of the markets has to offer. And until we develop a pool of human capital that is able to straddle the different markets, we're not really going to make the momentum that we all aspire to make. And if I could just make one suggestion, I think that to bring together a prestigious gathering such as this for the business community should be one priority. But in order to achieve that and make it successful, you would almost need to have a series of satellite dialogues in individual countries where you do bring together SME representatives, you build the momentum, and then you can bring together one big summit where really the people are well prepared and able to put forward the different perspectives. Education, whether you see it as a business or not, is fundamental to the development of business, because the exchange of students, which is currently taking place, will in time contribute to overcoming that lack of awareness and to building the business people that will be the bridges between the respective countries.
Thank you very much. Kumar.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I am Prabhat Kumar, Indian Ambassador to Colombia and Ecuador. I'll take this opportunity to underline the relationship India has with Latin America in general and Pacific Alliance in particular. India's trade has increased from $2 billion in 2000 to $47 billion in 2013 with Latin America. The main partners are, of course, Brazil is number one, but second is Mexico, third is Colombia, and fourth is Chile, and sixth is Peru. So we are very much intertwined with Pacific Alliance. We became an observer of the Pacific Alliance in 2014. We are trying to improve the relationship. We have started talking with the Pacific Alliance countries, with Peru for FTA. We are under discussion with Chile. We already have a PTA with a preferential trade alliance with Chile, and expanding the list. And we are talking with other countries also to start discussion on some kind of FTA or PTA. We are also a big investor, $20 billion of investment in Latin America, comparatively, and we have investment in information technology. Our information technology companies are employing thousands of people in Latin American countries, especially in the Pacific Alliance countries. We have been cooperating and working with Latin American countries for a long time under the South-South cooperation rubric, and we are looking for and ready to partner with Latin American countries and Pacific Alliance countries in issues, the themes that we discussed today in the morning and in the afternoon also, such as education, healthcare, where we can bring the costs down, and bilingualism, and science and technology and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Philippe Leray, yeah.
Thank you, Bill. I want to make two related comments and ask the opinion of the panel to this. The first thing is that sometimes we speak about Latin America, but we're here in the Pacific Alliance, and there is one reason why these countries are together. You know, there are many shared things why they formed this agreement, but there is another issue which I think very important, is that these are the fastest growing countries in the region. And this is a fact. Why are this, and this, I say this because it's a business panel, why when you look at Latin America, you look in especially to the Pacific Alliance, because this is probably where you have the fastest growth, by far the fastest growing group in the region. Second, because this is the most open, probably the most open group in the region. But I'm going to say a third thing, which is more of a prediction, which is this is the group that is of countries that is better prepared to weather the downturn of the commodity cycle, you know, which is looking at the future, because if you're investing for today, then you need to have, you're looking to many more years. So I'd like to see whether the panel would agree on this. The 3 of the 4 members of the panel are from outside Latin America and outside the Pacific Alliance. And my second point, which is related, is that because these countries have been growing in the past, have been growing very significantly, there is one of the major structural changes. There is a growing middle class. Was not mentioned in the panel, but it's a huge thing for business. It's not only that we're so happy that people who were in poverty now have overcome poverty and have become members of the growing middle class. We're very happy for them. But also this provides an economic bonus, because this creates new demand for, let's say, financial services, consumer durables, consumer goods, many more things, services that were not demanded before. So that creates, in a region like this, a huge opportunity, and I'd like to see whether that, you know, is another consideration when this group of panelists are looking at the region. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to interrupt. We've got a few more questions to come, but I want to just ask some members of the panel to address that question about preparation for the downturn of the commodity cycle, which I think is a very fundamental one, really, over the last year and over the next year. How do you see that, David? I mean, is it moving to this new normal that
bueno,
you talked about?
yo creo que
I believe that we are preparing to be countries that export much more sophisticated goods. And we are going to begin migrating from these primary exports to more developed ones. It is an ongoing process. There are countries that are further ahead than others. There are some that depend more drastically on commodities than others, but I do believe that we are preparing for this. And I believe that this is going to be seen in the impact that the fall of price of the commodities will have on the different economies. As Mr. Larraín was saying, we truly see how these economies are the ones that will lead the growth of Latin America despite what has taken place with the commodities. So I do believe that there are certain elements that indicate that in these countries there is an engine for development, and part of that is related to what he mentioned about the growing middle class, which is a reality in our countries, and which increases internal consumption, which means that companies within each of these countries will be forced to grow and invest much more.
Of emerging, global growth economies across a number of regions, some of which are very exposed to the commodity cycle, some which less. Do you agree with with the questionnaire about these four countries better prepared or not for this?
I do, and again, as well, we invest here, we have teams here, but sitting in Asia and as a group, we chose to focus on the 4 Pacific Alliance countries as opposed to, let's say, Brazil, and Brazil is very attractive in its own right, but we chose to focus specifically on those 4 countries because they're the same size as Brazil, but population-wise, GDP-wise, but they're growing at 2.5 times faster than Brazil. Yep. And by some estimates, 50% of businesses, Latin American businesses, reside in these 4 countries. And the fact that they formed the Pacific Alliance in 2012 is even more encouraging and attractive. And yes, from a consumerism perspective, consumer consumption accounts for a higher percentage of GDP growth in the Pacific Alliance countries as opposed to some other economies in Latin America.
Excellent. I'm just going to, I've seen 3 more questions. I'm going to take those and then ask the panel, each of them in turn, to have just some final comments, particularly, in my view, what you are going to expect from the Pacific Alliance over the next 4 or 5 years. What do you really see into the future? Now, there was a question on the right there. Yes, sir.
First, a comment, Stephen Donahue. I've heard a number of references to trying to get the business sector to encourage their political leaders to make policy decisions to enable these changes. But in my view, oftentimes the business sector takes the lead, and the policy changes have to follow the reality that exists. Then secondly, we heard from some of the diplomatic and political leaders this morning about how the Pacific Alliance is specifically not a political organization. But clearly there are political implications to what is happening when you show such a difference in the way the market forces and the free, open democracies of the Pacific Alliance countries produce dramatic results for their own people, economic results, financial results, growth of their economies. And so the more the Pacific Alliance encourages other countries to look at them as a model as opposed to as a closed economic model of some of the alternatives in the region, and the more the integration occurs with the Pacific, Asia-Pacific countries, the more likely it is that those leaders in the countries that are on the edge, that are thinking about which side of the fence they should fall on, decide to make the hard decisions that we've all been talking about to open their economies and to grow in the direction that we've been discussing.
Thank you, sir. Right at the back. Yes, Anson.
Thank you very much, Cindy Arnson from the Wilson Center. My question goes to the big gap between the aspirational and what currently exists in terms of integration within the Pacific Alliance. There's been a lot of talk this morning about the need to create manufacturing value chains in order not only to export to Asia, but also to trade more dynamically within Latin America and to other markets. And so it may be unfair to ask a panel that mostly has people who are from the banking sector or from finance, but I was wondering if you could address concretely what would it take to create manufacturing value chains within, say, just the Andean countries of the Pacific Alliance, and then be able to use that as a platform to take advantage of the value chains that Mexico already has with countries like Japan and the United States?
Thank you. Well, we'll come to that question in the final remarks. That's a very good question. One just here. Yes, exactly. So.
Thank you very much. My name is Jorge Rasuris. I am one of the members of the Alliance of the Pacific Entrepreneur Committee, and we are in charge in Chile of promoting financial integration. I'm very happy to say that the words of David Bohanini, we're working on that. Next week we are having a financial integration meeting in Santiago, where we are going to have the representatives of the public sector and private sector to treat exactly the matters that Mr. Bojarini is saying. And it would be very interesting to hear what, as we're going to have this meeting next week, and we pretend to end the meeting with very precise and concrete measures to be presented to the presidents of the Republic, of the 4 countries. Having Katia here, it would be very interesting to hear, and the other members from Asia, which are the experiences of financial integration in Asia that can be helpful for our case in the Alliance of the Pacific.
Thank you very much. So closing remarks to take in those questions, because I apologize to anyone I've missed, but we've run out of time. Katja, why don't you begin? A question was asked of you about experiences from Asia, integration, but also what are your expectations for the Pacific Alliance?
I think I agree with what Omar mentioned. Asia is not the best example within Asia to use as a model for integration. But what is a good example is Asia cross-border is definitely an area where you want to tap into and where you want to get that liquidity and that flow and bring back those investments to Latin America. And there's a lot of willingness on the Asian part to look into Latin America. It's been slow. It seems, at times frustrating, but we are seeing results and we have concrete examples. So by all means, the communication should continue. I think coming back to the Pacific Alliance, our economist calls this bloc the runners, as opposed to the walkers, which is programmed on the other side, on the other ocean. And I agree with Mr. Laren's comments. These countries have done their homework. I mean, the bloc is successful not necessarily because they became successful. They're successful because these economies have been working on their flexibility, on their openness, and they have come together in a very concrete manner to see results. So I tend to agree that they will weather the storm better than other countries, and they will have more opportunities to attract foreign investments into their countries.
David, what are your expectations? Give us your, of course, apart from accepting your proposal.
Well, my expectations, I think, are very positive in terms of commerce, and I do believe that there's an important issue worth mentioning here, which is that it is not only about free exchange of goods and bringing these economies together for them to be a more powerful market. I think there's also an important issue which has not been mentioned, which is technology transfer, so that our companies can become more competitive. And I do believe that here we must also be doing important work in terms of education as well. I think that the universities should be playing an important role in this sort of alliance. It's not only about businesses and state, it's also about the academy. I know that universities have their own networks, but I do believe that it would be a great opportunity for there to be technology transfer in order to improve our competitiveness, not only at the country level, but in order to also be able to make the future Trans-Pacific Alliance that was mentioned today. Because we know that even if there is pessimism on the part of some of the countries in Asia, there is a good example of how the business sector has developed here through technological development centers, which are done sector by sector. This is something that is just getting started in our countries. But so long as we can also network with this, I believe that we'll have the opportunity to have very much more competitive countries in order to enter into a climate of world trade.
Well, say, as you may know, we have, say, 200 offices in the world, in 90 countries, and everybody get together, and we try to collect the information throughout the world. But our impression is the Asian countries and Latin American countries, they are very much positive and active for the future. And particularly, besides, the United States economy is also now growing up. Therefore, under such circumstances, and this, Pacific Alliance, and also the Asians and Pacific Alliance communicate, collaborate together. Now the timing for this, and under such circumstances, and as you may know, say, under the Prime Minister Abe's management, and also 2020 is the Tokyo Olympic, another 5 years. Japan is very positive to, say, develop their economy and also to collaborate with the governmental, worldwide countries. And therefore, under such circumstances, we are very much prepared to support this kind of development. And I think now's the timing to communicate each other. That is my comment.
Very good. The last word, Omar. Are you going to create manufactured value chains in the region, as per the question? And do you see, is that part of your expectations?
I think, well, the Japanese are already doing it. Yesterday we were having a discussion where somebody from the Philippines mentioned that the Japanese, and through their Philippine arms, are taking manufacturing supply chains into Mexico. That's already started to happen. I think that is definitely an opportunity for all of us to leverage on, and for Asia there to export its technology through investment and partnering. My aspirations for the Pacific Alliance would be that somewhere over the next 5 years, you all are able to perhaps increase the number of countries within Latin America that join your alliance. We had a great suggestion this morning to include, in fact, some of the Asian countries to join that alliance, and ultimately and concurrently for ASEAN and the Pacific Alliance to form a full regional bloc and free up their labor markets, capital markets, to the betterment of each of the countries.
Wonderful. Well, before thanking the panelists, I want to tell you that we've got a 20-minute break now, just over 20 minutes, 25 minutes. When you come back here, it'll be the fourth plenary session, Conflict Resolution and Rebuilding Societies. So, as usual, leave your name places here or take them and put them on the table outside, but that's all administration. Much more important is to thank the panelists. Thank you very much.